Okay, so RISC OS development. It's been an incredibly busy year for RISC OS development. Quite frankly, it's something that was originally intended to be a sort of part-time, spare-time, not-for-profit for the lot of RISC OS projects. I seem to be doing more of that than I do Archon these days. But the important thing is that the reason why we're so busy is the fact that RISC OS development and its work to make RISC OS well, popular again, for want of a better term, is going from strength to strength. Over the last 12 months, you're going to see a variety of different projects that we've been involved with and are progressing. Perhaps most excitingly, that we have very real and tangible developments on our web browser project, which was one of the key reasons why RISC OS development was founded in the first place. As of about a week ago, we have now made available both of the two browser projects in sort of alpha beta form to shareholders. So people can actually download and play with the new browsers and see what all the fuss is all about. This will likely be made available to people who have supported us with O browser probably by Christmas, all being well. We just want to make sure that everything is sort of shaken down and settled down first, and then that will go to them. And hopefully we will have releases for everybody as free browsers sometime next year. I'm going to show you both the OWB browser and the IRIS browser. The reason we're developing two browsers is primarily because you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket if you don't have to. And secondly, what we found is that some browser technology can be fast, and some browser powerful can be capable, and you don't necessarily get all of your eggs in one omelette. So by supporting both projects, we're able to produce hopefully something that the browsers that will fulfill all needs, and the browsers can learn off each other. And what we've seen is that sometimes one browser will scoot forwards, and another time the browser will sort of go sideways for a bit and then scoot forwards a bit later. So, for example, for a long time, the IRIS browser that I will show you, it would be barely stable for a couple of minutes, but now we can run it for hours, days. It's a really solid piece of code now. But that only happened in the last 3 months. So for about a year and a half, it was sort of speculative development in a hope it was going to come together. Whereas conversely, the OWB browser that we'll show you, that was very stable and very solid right from day one, and it shot ahead. But now we're investigating sort of things like smoother scrolling and other stuff that's important. So it's almost like it's gone sideways for a while we sort of try new things with OWB, rather than the sort of like the main thing that you would see of like a browser with a website on display. So because development is so unpredictable like that, having the two browsers is a most excellent way forwards for us. So I'm just going to start with that because ultimately that's something I think most of you will be excited to see. I will need to reboot between the two browsers because at the moment they don't happily coexist, because they both use different versions of the same sort of thing, and rather than getting into a sort of model, it's cleaner if I swap between the two. We'll deal with OWB first. If I go to OWB and London 2019, this is the build that we've supplied to shareholders. Before we do this, I do need to get an internet connection going, so let's hope the mobile phone holds up. Show demo. Python 3.
Oh, that's fine.
Just make sure it's locked. Okay, we've got 78%. Okay. Right. Now, bear in mind, please, that this performance may be affected by the fact that I'm using a mobile phone internet connection as a bridge to give us an internet feed in here. So you can see that loaded about the same time as NetSurf would, or something like that. It's about a 2 to 3 second load. This is on an ARM X6 level machine. We are targeting that level of performance. Pi 3 should be able to more or less deliver the same performance, but a Pi 3 would take a bit longer to load because it's running off SD card rather than off solid-state disk. You can see on the raw site, for example, as I move my pointer over things, they change colour and interact because we have JavaScript running in the browser. We pulled this file from disk, but hopefully when I click on forum, we should, subject to our internet connection, boom, that's now pulling it down from live from the web. And if I click on announcements, and you can see that we have RISC OS scroll bars. I can drag the scroll bars around. We can highlight text and do copy paste. We can paste into the boxes. If I log in, remember my login details. You can see it's all working quite happily. I'm just doing sort of example things that you might do when you're using a web browser, and you can see how much more interactive it is in terms of stuff happening. I'm now going to go to the photos where they have a nice photo viewer written in JavaScript, and that would be why it's a development version. One thing that you see a lot of when you're developing projects like this is that not everything works first time, and why we've taken so long to deliver anything to the shareholders is that if you've got a product that isn't stable, isn't bulletproof, then it can send out the wrong message to people. So I want to go to photos.
Andrew, it's only right slap that in front of you.
My apologies. Let me take my mouse with me and sort of try and mouse on.
Yeah.
Okay, my apologies. So I believe if we go to Wakefield 2011, they have a fancy image viewer for this. So if we just pick the rule stand, you can see a fancy little animated widget, and boom, it opens up in a JavaScript window, and then we can close it, and it brings it back. Now, none of that would work in NetSurf. That's basically a demonstration of JavaScript working on the rule website. We can do more complicated sites. One that I visit and get PC news from is this is quite a big site, so it may well take some time to actually.
Have you tried it on Google Groups?
I have not really. This is. Mobile phone is probably okay. I want the full Hexas site rather than the mobile one. Obviously, this would be considerably faster if you were using a proper network connection. But what you'll see in a moment, they will fill in here. The images cycle via JavaScript. When we move our pointer over things, you'll see pictures will come in and change. Here they come. So as I move my pointer over that, you can see that changes. And if we just leave it sat there, after a few seconds, you'll see it will actually cycle through. Or should do anyway. So bumped. Maybe I just need to be more. Oh, there we go. Up here, we have the usual changing of colours of things. Let's scroll down. Basically, what you're seeing here are complicated sites with JavaScript working quite happily on RISC OS. again, I could, if I wanted to, log into the site. At user group meetings, I've logged into the site and shown all of that working quite happily. At the moment, for banks and things like this, we're getting there. The main thing is a lot of banks use pop-up menus, so they make you select your password carried to the third and fourth character from your password from a scrolling list of A to Z. In both Iris and OWB, the pop-up menus are not fully implemented yet, so that's the main sticking point of using banking sites at the moment. But you can see all that working quite happily. Good old Google. I'm not going to try Google Groups live because I honestly don't know. I prefer not to try things that I haven't tried before when I'm supposed to be doing an official.
All the old Acorn newsletters and the newsgroups on there, we can't get them on.
Yeah, I would certainly imagine. I mean, generally speaking, the JavaScript in OWB is older than the JavaScript in Iris, which is why I'm going to do Iris next. I would certainly expect Iris to do it. In fact, I may try that. With OWB, because we are somewhat experimental, you saw the crash. I don't want to try new stuff. Just Michael has asked me to just stick to, well, not quite stick to the script, but if you want, basically his words were, if you want to do fancy things, come and see him on the stand. I would certainly urge anybody who's interested in the browser, come and have a chat with Michael, who's the OWB author. He's come over from Sweden to show everybody the thing. Come and have a chat. Try the sites out with him, and he'll be able to sort of answer questions, and obviously if there are problems, then he'll be able to say, oh, okay, that's what he needs to fix and what to work on. So this is OWB. You've also got things like the history list, so we can sort of drop back to. We also support multiple windows.
Yeah.
Okay, well, in theory, we support multiple windows as well. But, yeah, so I think that's OWB's way of telling me that time has come for me to move on to the Iris one. I'll shut this down and reboot, so hopefully it comes back cleanly. So Iris, OWB is the faster of the two browsers in terms of, you saw it loaded to the icon bar of the window, but in a very nippy manner. Iris is a larger browser. It's based literally on 2019 version of WebKit, which is the same engine that powers Safari on the Mac. Indeed, when we're browsing with it, we're often told that they think we're running on a Mac with Safari. The code is a complete implementation of WebKit as of, I think, sort of April, May this year. The idea is it can actually track the WebKit code so that when maybe new versions of WebKit come out, Iris can be updated to the latest version without anything. With Iris, the big thing why we haven't been able to show it particularly before other than the screenshots is because Iris has required us to develop a complete new architecture for RISC OS 4 development to make the RISC OS memory space look like a Linux memory space. Because that's what big porting programs kind of expect. We've moved the GCC compiler on from GCC 4.7 up to GCC 8, which is, I believe, the current version. They'll probably be doing a big now or something just to make it look silly, but as far as I know, it's the sort of current GCC level. And Iris also has implemented something called ARM EADI, which is basically all to do with this changing of the memory space to allow RISC OS to appear as if it's using the same memory model as a Linux system when Iris is running. By giving it the same memory model, it means that we don't need to make massive changes to the WebKit code, and that means that we can keep it more up to date with the WebKit code, because as far as WebKit is concerned, it's seeing the same sort of memory space that it would do if it was running on a Linux system. Obviously, this is transferable work that RISC OS developers can do for other big porting projects. So by having this capability, it means that any other projects that we want to port from Linux can take advantage of it. And indeed, one of the things that is literally going on the last couple of weeks has been the process of actually releasing this to the developer community, so that everyone has access to these tools, the GCC8 and the EABI support for the memory model. So as you can see, it takes a little bit longer to load than OWB does, but being a more expansive project too, then that's what explains it. We do have plans for an OWB2, by the way. So OWB1 is essentially a prototype project, and Michael will be moving on to the OWB2, which is a more capable edition of OWB in the next few months. So if we try, my favourite site to test with this one is the dreaded BBC website. It helps if I don't put the hash on the end of it. Now, the big thing with the BBC website, why it's always a good test page, is that every image that you see there is JavaScript. The entire page is designed to dynamically fade in, fade out images and content as you scroll around the page. So most browsers without sort of pretty much current cutting-edge JavaScript working correctly will not display pictures on the BBC website. So if you ask NetSurf, for example, to display the BBC website, unless it gives you the mobile version or something, you will not see pictures on the BBC website. Actually getting to that stage, I can't stress enough how complicated that is under the hood, because there are reams and reams and reams of JavaScript functions running constantly on the BBC website. If I scroll down, you'll see that if we go down, you can see pictures and things fading in as we come down, and that's all being done live with JavaScript. Now you were asking about Google Groups. If I go on the home page, we click here, and you wanted what? Google Groups, was it, did you say? com.sys.acorn. Well, I'm going to use CSA announce if I may, because it's one I actually subscribe to. So you can see that live menu coming up again, all JavaScript, cascading style sheets. So there we are, that's it. So do bear in mind that I haven't tried this at all. Little mobile phone, do your business. The JavaScript in Iris is not as fast as it could be. At the moment, we are not able to use a just-in-time compiler for the JavaScript, which is the key to faster JavaScript performance. In part, this is because there's sort of some moves to discontinue ARM v7 support from the just-in-time compiler for JavaScript, as I described earlier in the year, in the main WebKit codebase. We are investigating what can be done to sort this out. We may well end up having to use a just-in-time compiler from last year, and frankly, from a RISC OS perspective, if we have to go back sort of 3 months, it wouldn't be the end of the world. You'd have fast JavaScript and Christmas 2018 generation browser, which would be leaps and bounds beyond anything we've had previously. But basically, we're just exploring multiple avenues to get to faster JavaScript. But you can see that that's displaying the Comsys Acorn news group. So, JavaScript, all well and good. From a banking perspective, we can go to accounts people are with, but you'll see that obviously I'm not going to log into my bank account. You can see with a bit of patience. That is the Lloyds Bank website as you would see it on any other platform. If I click the login thing, you'll see it drops down some JavaScript menus and things. So you can see there when I move my pointer over it, down came the menus, which is all done with cascading style sheets and JavaScript. So basically you're seeing a modern WebKit web browser running on RISC OS. It's a bit slow, we'd like it to be faster, but it works. With OWB we also have, with IRIS we also have multiple browser tabs. And we also have multiple windows. Look, it's done. So that's kind of what you'd expect. There's basic copy-paste support for clipboard. Oh, there we are. Always something to crash things. I was just going to try and show the bookmark manager. I haven't actually got any bookmarks programmed into it, but there is a favourites and bookmark system in there. And basically at the moment, the program has now moved from concentrating on actually getting... This is... I'm just going to reboot that. The program has moved from the core WebKit work to doing more in the way of the RISC OS front-end work for actually making it feel like a RISC OS application. So the latest build we had just before the show added in a download manager so that you can click on links and download them with a RISC OS save box and drag save to your hard disk and have files download from there directly onto your RISC OS hard drive. The test system that we've been using for this is a JavaScript-based cloud storage facility which can be used to transfer pictures and other resources via cloud servers. And you can send people an email with a link to click on, and this all works quite happily in IRIS so that you can sort of upload photos to a cloud storage, send a link, use IRIS to receive the link, and click it and download your files directly to your RISC OS machine. And it's all done with sort of JavaScript and CSS, all the things that you would expect a modern web browser to do. So yeah, by all means come to the stand, have a chat to Michael, etc. on the stand, try out the web browsers. If you're a RISC OS development investor, then you will already have access to that. Moving on from the web browsers, we have various projects to announce. First up, we have, as of last week, released Impression Style for free. Impression is a popular word processor DTP package back in the day. We've updated it to work in the modern RISC OS color depths and cut screen mode, so it's copes with BGR, RGB, modern mail merge, etc. We haven't 32-bit each style, so you do still need ABLA, but a lot of the support modules we've updated to be 32-bit safe and work on a 32-bit system and coexist with 32-bit applications. So basically, what we've created is a definitive version of Impression Style and given it away for free. RISC OS Development acquired the Impression family over the summer with the idea that we could give it greater oversight than the previous owners were able to do so, with the idea of re-energising development of Impression X and the Impression family overall. Hence, since taking it over, we've delivered the Impression Style for free. In an enhanced version, we have produced a new tutorial manual, or updated tutorial manual, and also delivered a 370-page full manual covering everything from Impression Style up to Impression X, with the help of Chris Hall on the latter project. So basically, it's a sort of commitment that we're giving to the RISC OS software field. We have also negotiated to release 2 more programs free of charge to RISC OS users. I am not 100%. One of the things that Richard was supposed to be doing was coming with those programs to the show. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say anything because the people involved have said yes, but they hadn't, when I left, sent the actual source code over. So one of them's networking related, one of them's program related. They're basically programs that a lot of you will like and know, and to have them available free of charge again, and open source will obviously be a big plus for the platform. We have, on the subject of programming, we have supported a development of the new Python 3 programming language to RISC OS. At the moment we have Python 2 programming language, Python being the preferred programming language for people with Raspberry Pis and the like. If you read a Raspberry Pi magazine with any kind of typed in listings, they'll be written in Python. So if RISC OS is to be accepted outside of the people in this room, as a programming environment, we need to have Python support. RISC OS traditionally had Python 2.7, but Python is now on 3.8. The RISC OS port is of 3.8, and it is running, and it is, you've got SWI access, so you can access RISC OS functions, theoretically put RISC OS applications with Windows and things through the SWIs. There is still some way to go in terms of supported libraries. The bottom line is that RISC OS Developments has supported this project and is working with a programmer to deliver a complete, or as complete as we can make it, Python 3.8 environment for RISC OS as part of our initiatives to try and grow the platform and support what's happening in the wider world in terms of programming on Raspberry Pi and the like. Speaking of Raspberry Pis and the wider world, one of the projects that was announced in an earlier talk by Wi-Fi Sheep is a combined video and disk project that we're working on to introduce new users and also provide more information for existing users via YouTube and a video series. The videos will also be made available in MPEG format so they can be viewed on RISC OS machines as downloads. So if you don't want to use YouTube, you can watch them the other way. These videos will not only introduce RISC OS and the hardware and the mice, and how to flash a distribution onto a Raspberry Pi disk and boot a Raspberry Pi with it, but also give tips and tricks for existing users on using RISC OS applications, and basically brush up on the stuff that you may have forgotten over the years. We'll also be introducing people to new applications, programming on RISC OS, and just basically covering as many RISC OS related topics as we can in terms of giving people information in video format. The idea is to meet people where they're at, and these days if people want to find information about things, they tend to look on YouTube and on the internet. At the moment, RISC OS is not well covered in that regard, probably because RISC OS itself has not had good YouTube support. Anybody who's new to the platform is likely to want to look at those things to find out more information about RISC OS. So we feel that supporting that project with Wi-Fi Sheep is a very good way of pushing things forwards. We're accompanying this with a new distribution of RISC OS, which builds on the work that Rule have done in the past with the Raspberry Pi distribution. But whereas the Rule Raspberry Pi distribution is designed to fit on a very small SD card with the bare minimum of software supplied, so the supporting distribution for the video series will be designed to run on a larger 8 gig or 16 gig SD card or higher, with considerably more software included, and programming resources particularly, because obviously programming is going to be one of the big focuses of this, but also making sure that people who are new to RISC OS can see a broad range of programs out of the box ready to go, essentially a best of RISC OS experience. Apparently there was concern when this was announced earlier on in the day that this was somehow standing on Rule's toes. Quite the opposite. Rule asked us, when we took over the ownership of RISC OS last year, to take a lead in terms of bringing things forwards. We were concerned that, I believe the current distribution of RISC OS still on for the Raspberry Pi on the Rule website is the closed source version, not the open source release. So in terms of spreading this out to the world at large, we need to have an open source version with plenty of software that is designed with a supporting video series to go forwards. This will be available free of charge to everybody, and we're hoping to be able to attend Raspberry Pi Jams and give RISC OS on an SD card free of charge to people who are interested in using RISC OS in the field. This will also be available through the RISC OS Development's website and through the Wi-Fi Sheep channel, and also there's absolutely no reason why that can't be on the World website accompanying their distribution as well. The only reason for doing it ourselves is to tie into the video sequence, and also because we believe that there's a need for a much broader, bigger RISC OS distribution than just the bare bones. That a lot of people who try RISC OS are not necessarily familiar with where to get new software from. They don't know what those programs are. They don't know what RISC OS can do. So the more stuff that we can present to them to introduce RISC OS and its capabilities, and allow them to actually get straight into programming or using the applications, the better. And by having that coupled with a video series to actually show them how to do things and introduce people to things, we believe that's the best way to approach getting a next generation of users into the RISC OS scene. Obviously that will be available to everybody, existing users combined, and for use in open source projects around the world. The other big news that we have is that over the summer we completed a deal to allow one of our investors to deliver a RISC OS solution that will be going on potentially 100,000 plus units, where RISC OS will be front-facing and actually people will actually see RISC OS. It won't just be an embedded operating system hidden in a black box, but it will actually be live RISC OS desktop driving products. Whilst that doesn't necessarily make money for RISC OS developments and the RISC OS scene as a whole, because RISC OS is now open source, so that doesn't give us the per copy income. What it does mean is that in order to utilize and deliver products based on open source RISC OS, development will be needed, and we're seeing development funds coming from that project back into RISC OS developments to make next generation of RISC OS possible. For example, we are able to announce today that we have between 10 and 20,000 pounds available to work on TCP/IP and Wi-Fi development for RISC OS networking to ensure that the next generation of RISC OS networking is possible. And we are working with several programmers to make that a reality. That's made possible by projects like this, which is taking a lot of time to sort of encourage and foster. We also have interest in Thailand and in Hong Kong and mainland China. And indeed the Pine Book, which I'll show you in the ARCOM bit later. By the way, we will have a break in a few minutes. I'm sorry, it's because I'm effectively doing two talks. So, yeah. I'm just sort of rattling through my mental thing of RISC OS development things to talk about. This is the problem. So there are literally so many things that we've been involved in making possible. That's the next thing. We've also negotiated with various guys in Cambridge the release of several components of RISC OS that are still closed source. That's to do with the networking again, and we have approval from all involved. We will then be working with Raw shortly to actually make the files available. We'll be starting with the documentation for the DCI4 specification for networking, which is previously you had to sign NDAs to get hold of copies, which is kind of ridiculous that you have to sign an NDA just to get a document that tells you how to use features of RISC OS. That's all scrapped. You'll be able to get hold of that documentation from development and also the source code to the various modules in due course. That's something that that various people have been trying to get sorted for probably knocking on for 10 to 12 years. So it's brilliant that we can finally make that happen. And this is all possible because RISC OS developments, we put in effectively full-time work on it alongside our day jobs. Not so good for our wives, but good for the RISC OS scene. So Richard and I basically do a lot of work on this to make these things possible. And that's made possible by the investment that you guys have made in RISC OS developments, that essentially RISC OS developments wouldn't exist. We wouldn't be able to do these things if it wasn't for the investment that we've had. We don't pay ourselves for the work and the time that we put in, but we use the money to make projects and things happen. Obviously, if you want to become an investor in RISC OS developments, that you see the things that we are doing and you like what you see, one of our investors has actually said that he will meet and match any investments that are made at the show with investments of his own. So please come and talk to me. I was supposed to be please come and talk to Richard, but I guess please come and talk to me if you're interested in supporting what we're doing with RISC OS developments. Forgive the thinking, I'm clicking through the various projects that we want to discuss. I'll probably stop there. I'm almost certain I've forgotten at least 2 or 3 of the things that we are working on with RISC OS developments. Yeah, as you can tell, our objective is clear. The web browsers, modernising development tools, releasing things free of charge, and taking RISC OS forwards, opening it to new users, and making RISC OS the absolute best it can be. And we want to deliver that in a way that is open source, is free, and is done in partnership with both Swift.open and with the rest of the community. And that's the key agenda for RISC OS developments, is basically to give full-time, fully funded, fully RISC OS, and make it the best it can be. Okay, so does anybody have any questions on RISC OS developments?
The impression manual, is that going to be a PDF or?
It exists as both an impression document, funnily enough, and as a PDF. It should be going out to anybody who's got Impression X as part of the Impression X distribution. This is it's been given to Richard, so you know it's all there. It's not included as standard with style because you get the 60-page tutorial manual which does cover most of the basics. The idea being is if you want to go deeper with style and have the full manual, you can either sort of make a small contribution, sort of £5–10 to RISC OS developments to say thank you, or you can look at Impression X, or we may well make Publisher available in some form in due course, the sort of middle tier of impression with the manual. But quite frankly, having gone through the tutorial, it covers all the main ground of frames, linking the frames together, making pages, doing documents, printing. I updated it to cover making PDF files. All the main things you could want to do with it are covered in the tutorial, and then the manual basically goes into much finer detail on all the different dialog boxes and things. You also have built-in online help in Impression, which also takes you through all of the built-in dialog boxes. So with the style product, you've got the 60-page tutorial, 65-page tutorial, and you've got the online help. So it's fairly comprehensive in what you've got in there, and then manual will be with Impression X and Publisher, or as I said, I can send by email to somebody who's, if they want to make a sort of minimal donation to company funds to say thank you for the work that we're doing, then I'm quite happy to send it to them. But it just seemed a bit excessive to include that with the free version that when you've got the tutorial and the online help and everything else. People who are spending £60 on Impression X deserve to get the odd bit of good extra. So yeah, and obviously the other thing that's come with that is that we are making more programming resources available to our Impression. We've got 2 additional people who are busily studying the source code to Impression with the aim of assisting and speeding forward that. One of the things that we found out when we took it over was that one of the reasons why development has been slower than we would have liked was that Richard is actually fixing a lot of bugs as he goes, so that actually converting just a few lines of code can take him most of an evening. And you think, crikey, that's really slow, but what his reason being is he's having to compare the code with later versions that computer concepts have got, which we don't have the source code for. See what the bugs and changes were, then mirror that back and 32-bit the end result for each little section. Now, one of the things that we want to do with the larger programming team is actually have multiple strands of the source so that we can 32-bit things independently of the bug fixing. And that way we can deliver a 32-bit version of the code that we do have sooner, and then gradually incorporate the bug fixes over time. Now, that's not as horrible as it sounds, because the version that we do have source code happens to be the same version of compression that I've been running on my machine for the last 20 years. Until I saw the version numbers, I didn't even realise there was anything later than the version I was running. So clearly the version that we do have source code for is more than adequate for 99.9% of users, but obviously incorporating those bug fixes would be an ideal situation. So by having multiple programs working on that, it means that there can be a division of labour and hopefully deliver a 32-bit version of repression in a much shorter timescale.
Are you sort of working alongside Richard, are you?
Yes.
He's come under sort of your umbrella or what?
Yes, basically. The very first thing we did before we announced it to anybody else was to have a sit-down meeting with Richard and make sure he was fully on board and delivering a whole bunch of extra stuff. And it's very much, we're supporting what he's doing. We're not taking it off him or taking it over. It's a case that previously it was owned by a company called XAT in Holland, and XAT are actually investors in RISC OS developments, but they don't have the time or, frankly, the geography to be able to oversee. I mean, the language barrier isn't an issue. They have very good English, but you know, if they're in Holland, they can't have a sit-down meeting with Richard because it's, you know, geography. So by being in the UK with him, by being able to meet him, by being able to bring on programmers, etc., we can have a much more sort of active relationship.
Basically, you're sort of putting more heads together, basically. Sort of,
kind of, yeah. I mean, basically, Richard has been working effectively in isolation, which is not really the best.
Yeah.
I mean, it works for him, but you know, you end up in a bubble, and you know. We want to help where we can. Basically, is the thing. I'm not going to make any wild predictions and promises because that's stupid. But all I can say is that you know it's something that we want to make happen, and you know anything we can do to help move us forward. If anybody wants to sort of see the impression source code and actually be involved, we are not being closed about it at all. It's available if people want to do it, but we do want to deliver it to people who actually care and want to contribute. We don't want to just be passing it out to all on sundry. Just you know.
Am I right in thinking a lot of the original source code, various bits of it have gone missing out there?
Yes and no. He wouldn't be able to produce whole new executables of the program if the source code was missing.
Yeah.
So the core impression source code is all there.
Yeah.
What seems to be missing is one or two of the support modules.
I
Now, I went through with Richard to see which, this is where I was talking earlier about the 32-bit modules that are already present in the present style. I went through what was available, what was already converted to 32-bit. Frankly, when I was running it on my virtual Acon system just to see what was actually loading and what was missing and needed, none of the bits that we didn't have source code to were actually being loaded into my virtual Acon machine. So there are modules that exist that are either never used or extremely rarely used by impression. It does rather load certain bits on demand, but I was editing the big 370-page manual at the time, and the modules were not present. So, if those modules did have to exist as angular versions in perpetuity, that probably wouldn't be the end of the world. In most cases, they're either not needed or there exist 32-bit versions of them already that have been hacked together from binary. So, I think the most critical thing I would say that's missing is probably there's a module used when loading TIFF files into impression that is missing the source code. But quite frankly, if you wanted to load TIFF files, it would seem much more sensible to create a general sort of change FSI-based multi-image format loader that would load not just TIFF files but PNGs and JPEGs, and well, we do already do JPEGs, but change FSI does a vast range of formats, not just TIFF. TIFF, and it would seem far more sensible to generate something, a small new loader that uses that, than worrying too much about trying to reinvent a module for TIFF loading that, and quite frankly, when was the last time most of us used TIFF files?
Yeah.
Okay, so what happened? Till the next talk, or?
Yes.
I've not talked about Archon.
Yeah.
Pardon my French. Right, okay. End of that. Archon. Native laptops as a result of open source RISC OS. Buy one, please. It's really good. Lots of fancy software that we've written specifically for the project. Probably about 10 times the amount of software that we've done for any of our previous projects. You can play with them on the stand. Come and try them. 14 hours battery life. They're real, they work. You can buy them and walk away with them at the show.
Theoretically, I bought one.
And you bought one, and several other people have bought them, and all the feedback has been like, yay, time up RISC OS, yeah, great. So, yeah, we love them. And the battery life is real. Well, you know, PC laptops, they say, oh, you can do 7 hours battery life. You turn them on, 3 minutes later, it's running out of battery. Well, not literally, but you know what I mean. I've genuinely had one of these things and stopped, watched it. Admittedly, I wasn't doing much with it, but it did last for 14 hours. At least for an hour on like 1 and 0%, which is kind of crazy. But so yeah, they're really mobile and portable. They only weigh 1 kilo. You can sort of, I'm a weak person, I can do.
Is the processor throttled when you're on battery?
No, it runs at full flat. Yeah.
Wi-Fi working with them?
No Wi-Fi. You can use a USB Wi-Fi thing from RISC OS Bits, or we can supply them, or what have you. I think RISC OS Bits charge £18 for the privilege, so it's really expensive. And we have things like docking kits and USB storage and things. It runs Linux, so you can run Firefox and Wi-Fi on the Linux. That means that if you need to use like the hotel and can't you to log in, you can log in with the Linux, get the device online, and then use RISC OS, etc. It's the only computer I've ever used that I really use portably. Except with the odd tablet historically, but I don't have it plugged in virtually ever to the charger, except when I put it on charge for a couple of hours when I'm not doing anything. It runs almost exclusively just sat on my lap as a laptop, and I've never had that experience with a PC laptop. Quite frankly, I've always found that I need to be near a charging point, have it into the mains power. So, it really is quite remarkable. The RISC OS runs natively, so you can swap between the RISC OS and Linux. You can transfer files between RISC OS and Linux on a tiny USB. And we have sound, and we have graphics acceleration going, so that things move around the screen faster and things. So yeah, come and play with it on the stand, big mode, fancy, high DPI icons, lots of really cool stuff. The other project that we've done this summer is something called Lock Screen, which basically does as this is on the tin. It locks your screen so that basically you require a password to log in. It's all very pretty. It can happen at startup or when the computer is idle. So if you leave your computer, boom, it's locked, and then you come back, you can unlock it. Really important because people often store personal information on their computers, or club information, or all sorts of personal information on computers. You have a responsibility to keep information secure and private. Lock Screen will allow you to lock your RISC OS machine and basically password protect it so that you can't easily get into that information. It blocks out most of the common sort of old break, control breaking type things that you could do to get past a RISC OS application. And it does so without identifying what it is or what platform it is, so that if somebody came and tried to get into your computer, they wouldn't know that it was a RISC OS machine running Lock Screen. So they can't just Google how to get into RISC OS with Lock Screen. It's just, as far as they're concerned, it's a sort of grey box. This was done for one of our commercial customers who wanted to have servers deployed on site, They would have no control over who was going to try and plug in a keyboard or mouse into the servers and mess around with them. So LockScreen provides a way of blocking that, so that if somebody did try to do that, they would just see a pretty picture saying, please enter password.
So is there some thought of also putting file systems on?
One of the things that I have is actually sort of in the specification, in the way that it stores the password information in the choices files, is the idea of being able to block individual folders so that when you go into a particular folder, it could ask you for a password for a particular folder. I've also talked with our regular programmer. He had the idea of something he's been wanting to do anyway, which is basically an individual per file encryption, so that you can actually password protect an individual file, and that it would essentially be decrypted on the fly, and then re-encrypted when it's sent back. But that would be a different project because that would actually have to be sort of a live encryption, decryption on individual file type thing. Okay, final questions, if anything. I know that we started questions earlier, but final question.
One version of PDF.
Well, I mean, we supplied the current versions on our machines. Well, generally with the PDFs on this, because if you have files that you don't that are difficult, you can throw them to the script, and that's what it correctly. You've got them to do that. All this means